Good evening, our viewers, wherever you're watching us all over the world, in Chiwempala, in Chimwemwe, in Kankoyo, in Mulobezi, in Livingstone, in Chawama, Chinsali, Mporokoso, Mansa. Welcome to this special edition of the Bakwetu TV. I'm your host, Patrick Chilufya from Sussex, UK. And our guest is Dr. James Musonda. Those who watched last week, you must have listened to Dr. James Musonda. I will still bring him and introduce himself, and I also introduce just a brief background of the topic we're going to talk about today. As you're aware, we're still talking about economic development in the mining sector, specifically Zambia. And this is the third part. And most of you must be wondering, why are we still talking about economic development in mining. And this is the third part. We talked about agriculture. We did two parts. Yeah, it's because, as you all aware, that the new Dawn administration has an ambitious policy objective to increase the production of copper from 800,000 tons currently to 3 million tons. This will require a healthy, happy, motivated, fit, physically, emotionally, otherwise unskilled workforce to achieve this objective. And not only that, mining is the biggest contributor of GDP and forex in Zambia. So, which means it's a very, very important sector. Even our current government has recognized it as an important sector, and they want to develop this industry even further. But then we've got so many questions, and today we'll be talking about the welfare of a mining worker, and also we'll be talking about social responsibility, corporate social responsibility. Today, before I bring in my guest, who is Dr. James Musonda. Dr. James Musonda is a social political scientist with a PhD in mining anthropology. He's going to explain what that means. As you already noted in the previous discussion, Dr. James Musonda is social political anthropologist. He conducted his research in the underground mines in the Copper Belt, working as a helper for 9 months. He spent another 9 months studying the everyday life of miners to understand their experience of life under the new mines. He worked for the mines before his PhD. He got retrenched just a day after his birthday in 2009 in the context of global economic crisis. However, because he still had an outstanding bank loan, the bank took everything with him, leaving nothing with him in 2021. As part of in 2021, as part of PhD, Dr. James published a peer review article on mine workers' experience of debt titled "Modernity on Credit." It is available open access on Google Scholar. The article explores the borrowing practice of Copperbelt underground miners in the context of growing debt consumption since privatization of the country's mining sector. It also explores why Zambian mine workers borrow and how they use their loans. It shows that growing debt consumption among mine workers is related to the labor practices of the privatized mining companies. Mining companies. The payments in kind that typically accompanied mining employment in the 20th century, such as housing, children education, water, and electricity, has been withdrawn, and meeting this cost now accounts for a significant proportion of the miner's income. Employers have effectively shifted their responsibility for social welfare on their workers who receive increasingly low or meager wages. At the same time, mass layoffs since privatization have placed increased pressure on miners to look after retrenched and unemployed family members while inflation has eroded their wages. The growth of credit market has accompanied and facilitated these transformations. For contemporary mine workers, debt consumption is an attempt to reproduce the economic, social, culture conditions of a modern life, which mine workers on the Copper Belt have associated with urban living since the colonial days. They invest borrowed money in housing, in family education, and businesses. given the rising cost of living and increasing precarious nature of mine employment, this modern life is primarily about getting by and securing a post-employment future. Miners realize that they cannot live without debt. As such, they employ various coping strategies to manage their indebtedness. Today, I'm privileged to have Dr. James Musonda to discuss as an insider view of debt. This is an attempt to make research applicable and relevant to everyday life. Dr. James Musonda, welcome to Bakwetu TV once again. Please
Thank you very
introduce
much.
yourself.
Thank you very much. I don't need to introduce myself any further because I think that you've done a perfect job already. Yeah, James Musonda is a Zambian, and that's what's important. And an anthropologist is somebody who studies the everyday life of the people that he examines and tells their story. In my case, it's a story that comes partly from my experience as an employee of the mines, as a data, as a borrower, but also as a Zambian and as a researcher. So I'm giving you an inside perspective of what happens. And I want to tell you something. When I went to the underground, Mr. Chilufya, the first day I went underground, what these miners did to me was that they took me in a muddy place. And when we reached, I think it was level uh, 500, 5 kilometers underground, 5 kilometers underground. And then I got stuck in the mud. And they were laughing at me. And I was saying, like, but how can you be laughing at me when I'm stuck? Can't you see that the underground is dangerous? Can't you just help me get out of this mud? And they kept laughing, but eventually they did. But they told me one story. You know why we're laughing at you? Because twalifuasa. You've been asking us about loans. If you watch Fuasa, if you to Fuasa. So that's a story from the underground. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Musonda. Dr. Musonda, here we're talking about two things here because our government, as you are aware, they've got an ambitious objective or policy to increase copper production from the current 800,000 to 3 million tons. And today we're going to explore corporate social responsibility and also the welfare of the workers. And as I said earlier, for this to be achieved, they don't just need skilled manpower. They need a miner who is ready in everyday life. Are they healthy? Are they paid well? Are they fit? Fitness does not mean just physically, emotionally, you know. So because for the government to achieve that huge objective, the miners needs to be ready and fit for that purpose. So let's just talk about corporate social responsibility. Is it the same from the 20s to independence, from independence to privatization, and privatization to now? Do you think the current social responsibilities towards the welfare of workers will make Zambia achieve that 3 million tons of copper the government has embarked on? Over to you.
Thank you very much. And I like the idea that this idea of yours, Mr. Chilufya, where you always insist on having a historical background to everything. I think this is a good idea. I like this. Yeah, okay. Yeah, starting from the 1930s, when these mines became operational, the kind of corporate social responsibility was tailored inwards. It was folded inwards in the sense that It focused on the provision of housing, provision of social welfare, healthcare, food, and entertainment to the mine workers. Okay, that is in addition to the wages. Now, the problem that was there in the colonial period was that this social responsibility for the welfare of workers was mainly directed at benefiting the white mine workers at the expense of Zambians. Remember, I had talked about the job caliber, where I said that whereas the mines would provide houses, for example, they would provide 5,000 houses, housing units to 15,000 African workers, meaning each family will have 3 people living in one house. They would also provide food, they provide mealie meal and these kind of things. And one incident to Chilufya about this corporate social responsibility happened in the 1935 when a woman was on the food lines trying to collect food, a miner's wife. And a white person, a white Muzungu, insulted this woman because she was saying the food ration is not adequate. And when she did this, the woman was very annoyed to receive the insults from a white person. And that day, the mine workers went on strike until that person apologized. A white person was brought in front of everybody and was told to apologize, and he was even transferred. Now, what does this story tell us? It tells us that during that period, although the kind of social benefits that were given were minimum, they still had the right. At least they could make a claim on the company. You could see that the woman here is a woman, a miner's wife, who is not employed in the mines, making a claim. During the time of Lawrence Katilungu as president of the African Mine Workers Union of Zambia, in Nkana at Nkana Mine, they used to congregate when they are doing negotiations for improvement of welfare and wages. They used to meet at what is called Nkana Stadium. It was called Scrivener Stadium. That is where they would meet, and the unions would call everyone, including children, and say, what do you want for us to go and put on the table for the negotiations with the white people? So women would participate in the negotiations. When there's a strike, and everyone is supposed to stay indoors because the white people would come and see who is there, including the women. Only children and a few women would go out to buy 1 or 2 things, but everyone would stay in the house. The reason was very simple. The corporate social responsibility, even if it was racialized during that period, people would still make claim on it. If you see, even when we talk about the kind of demands, starting from the 1940s, when the mining companies now started to listen to the mine workers, African mine workers, the demands were about social improvement. The 1935 strike was about against the taxes, but the 1940 strike and the strikes that came, the rolling strikes in the 90s, did not just talk about wages. They talked about improvements in housing. They talked about water. They talked about electricity. They talked about houses that each child, a female, because in the past, girls and boys would be lumped in the same room. After the 1940s, the mine workers said, no, we need a house, one for the boys, one for the girls, and the house for me as the owner, as a breadwinner with my wife. These are the kind of demands that they start making. And the mining companies, though reluctantly, tried as much as possible to do this until we reach a point of 1964. During this period, we see Kaunda and his colleagues, Simon Mwansaka Pwepwe, Harry Mwangankombula, and all these fight for our independence. Simon Zukas, all these gallant men, and of course women. You've got Mama Julia Sichikamaneka. All these important people played a very, very significant role. But much of the mobilization for independence rested on the women and mine workers individually. The unions did not adopt a political role, but rather they used their workers. Now, when we come into 1964, first and foremost, we are free now politically. We can choose our own leaders, but we are not free economically. So then Kaunda realizes that, well, the only way that we can improve the welfare of our Zambians by providing, now this is where we have the epitome, the climax of the social responsibility. So Kaunda says, I will give you free housing. And because we only have 100 graduates, I will give you free education so that we have more graduates. I will give you jobs so that you occupy jobs in the mines that they were locked out of, you were locked out of. I'll give you free education. I'll give you free water and electricity. I'll even give you eggs. I'll give you milk. I'll give you almost all, including cleaning outside the yard. When a bulb is finished, just go to the housing and it will be given. So now, because from 1964, in the first 5 years, there's also a multi-party system. So Kaunda is under pressure that if I don't provide to my people, Hari Mwanga Nkumbula's ANC will take over from me. He wants to secure his hold, And so what does he do? What does he do? He looks at the behavior of Simon Mwansaka Pwepo. Simon Mwansaka Pwepo is saying, can you nationalize the mines? Kapwepo started saying this in 1964, immediately after independence. But Kaunda said, no, well, we cannot just do this. Until 1969, Kaunda says, no, what we want for our workers and the citizens is not adequate because we can't depend on the taxes. Remember what Kaunda was doing this period? He increased the taxes to about 70%. The amount of taxes, as I mentioned last time, were even more than the dividends that were remaining for these foreign companies. But where did Kaunda take this money? Kaunda built our universities, built colleges, built secondary schools, built primary schools, he built roads, he built hospitals, he built clinics. Now, that is what the corporate social responsibility means. It did not just cover the workers and the families, but also people who are not directly employed by the mines. So we have an expanded, some scholars have called this as corporate paternalism, a kind of social infrastructure that includes free housing, free water, free electricity, free education, free healthcare, including burial costs for the dead. In 1987, they even introduced birth grants, what miners call dishamusana. Every miner who was a child, they had to buy nappies for the child. In the 1990s, just before privatization, Kaunda brought cheap loans. So the history of loans starts from the 90s, just before. I mean, just as we went to 1991 before the election. So free loans cheap loans are given. So we see that the economic difficulties, even if Kaunda was doing all this, copper price by Patrick had really fallen down. The ZTCM could not sustain this social benefit. But Kaunda was even borrowing. In 1977, for example, Kaunda borrowed money to pay workers at Ron. Can you imagine? This is the extent of the corporate social responsibility. Now, I don't know if you want me to go now to talk about the current form of corporate social responsibility, Mr.
I think so, because the reason why I want us to talk about that is to answer some of the questions where are our miners ready to produce 300 million tons? And corporate social responsibility is very important. As you said rightly, I grew up in Miseshi Mindolo, one of the mining towns in Kitwe, and our parents were getting meager salaries, but because of this corporate social responsibilities introduced by Kaunda, free housing, electricity, water, schools, there's schools like trust schools, schools like Impelembe Secondary School, which has educated a lot of Zambians, most of them in the diaspora, and then in January, there used to be school uniform allowances, for, up to about 4 children or 6, something like that. So, but the question is, all these perks have been withdrawn by the new um, 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 owners of mines. despite them making a lot of money, more than what ZCCM was making, because copper prices have gone up. But the question is, what is the state of a miner now in terms of social responsibility? How can you you've talked about in the 20s up to independence, up to privatization. Now, what is it? How is it?
Yeah, so first, to understand the kind of corporate social responsibility now is that corporate social responsibility has, if for those that witnessed the election campaign of Mr. Rupiah Band, may his soul rest in peace. And at some point, Mr. Rupiah Band had brought in what were called image builders, whose idea was to create a particular persona out of Mr. Rupiah Band that was attractive to Zambians to enable the vote to be given to Mr. Rupiah Band. Corporate social responsibility today is a form of image building for mining companies. It is not intended to benefit the person, the mine workers, but rather it is intended to create a picture that mining companies are actually caring for the workers, when in fact not. I'll give you an example. Whereas in the past, a mine worker would get, let's say, what we today we have at 5,000, because the lowest paid mine employee at the moment, a direct employee in the mines today, who is a direct pensionable on permanent basis, is 3,800 kwacha. That is the lowest paid. The highest unionized worker is just about 8,000. That is the basic salary they receive. In 2018, the lowest paid contract worker, somebody who works in the mine, they normally call them a contractor, got 650 kwacha. That was the lowest paid. Now, what that means is that the salaries are low. That is the first thing. Okay. Now, look at what is happening to this salary. When these companies came, they said, look, we are making losses, as they always say. We cannot afford to give housing allowance. So first, they had to ensure that the law, the Employment Act, is changed to remove the mandatory provision of housing allowance, and then of housing, so that they can now provide just an allowance. So you find that 30% of 5,000 kwacha, because half of 5,000 is 2,500. So 30%, you're talking about somewhere around 1,000. Now, what is 30% of 3,000? That's about 900. Where can you find a decent house of 900? What is 30% of 650 kwacha? Where can somebody find a decent houses? So what has happened with the new mining companies? The first thing they did was to remove housing. Then they removed free education. Then they removed water and electricity. They removed diapers. They said that it is a joke. It's ridiculous. How do you give diapers to workers? They found that to be very ridiculous. You know, mining is naturally a dangerous activity, and it destroys the environment surrounding it. So under ZCCM, what they would do is they will go and do revegetation. They get new plants and new soils to go and plant in the communities. And they would even go with water to water down the dust. They did all these kind of things. In some cases, they even built hospitals and clinics, even where there was no mining compound. This is the extent of what we had under ZCCM. All this has been abandoned. I'll give you a typical example. In Mufulira, we had two hospitals, Ronald Ross and Malcolm Watson. And then we had a lot of other clinics. Ronald Ross was handed over to the government, and now you have only Ronald Ross. Malcolm, which is owned by the mines. In Ikitwe, we had Nkana mine and Usakile mine. They handed over Nkana mine to the government, which has now been bought by the Chinese. Then they remained with only Usakile, which was located near the mine, Central Shaft and SOB, South Obod. Now, when you look at the clinics, if you go to Usakile, there's C7 clinic and many other clinics that were there. Today, all those clinics have been abandoned. According to these mining companies, this is the West. Now, if you now talk about their behavior in terms of corporate responsibility, one thing I want to mention is that when they are doing tax calculations, corporate social responsibility is something they also add to their costs. So they deduct corporate social responsibility for the purpose of calculating taxes so that they pay less taxes. Now, what form of corporate social responsibility? If you go to Kitwe, they have upgraded the golf club and they spent millions. If you go to Kansanshi, if you go to Lumwan, they've got a golf club and they spent millions there. And to them, that is corporate social responsibility. And they use that to deduct. But who goes at the golf club? It is the same Wazungos. So in terms of what it is now, if they say they give malaria mosquito nets, if they buy drugs for TB, if they have a small hospital that they are running, they use all the costs there as part of the production costs. Now, in the past, when a company spends on the workforce in terms of health, that is part of its responsibility. But now it's used as for tax purposes. So what does it mean? The companies are not interested at all in the welfare of the workers in the same way. In short, they are looking at the workers in what one of the authors has said, a bare life, as if these workers don't have a family. Look at a contract worker. A contract worker is only given a salary of, say, 3,500, when a direct employee gets maybe 6,000. But then this contract worker does not have health care. So if the wife gets sick or if the child gets sick, he has to go and pay. Now, talk about surgery. Let's say somebody has got cancer, which will require surgery, specialized surgery. But before even that, you require a lot of tests and medical tests. And at the hospital, in our government hospital, they don't have. So they probably send you to Lusaka. I received cases during my research where a mine worker who was a direct employee under ZCCM was retrenched and then started working as a contractor. His wife was pregnant and she had an emergency. They went to Sakile Mine Hospital and she was told, no, your husband is not an employee and you have to just go to a government clinic. She delivered on her way to the clinic. Now, what kind of social responsibility is this? It is a corporate form of social responsibility aimed at creating an impression. It is corporate social responsibility rooted in image building. And you are going to find this everywhere. Go to the Oppenheimer's companies in South Africa, you find this kind of behavior. So we have a very politicized corporate social responsibility. If a government that is in power is a favorite because it has given them free taxes, you are going to see that during an election, they are going to mend 1 or 2 roads or do this kind of thing. It's a kind of social responsibility based on their kind-heartedness. So today they can choose to come and donate desks. But you see, you cannot hold them to account if they don't. That is why when Vedanta says we are going to feature into the corporate social responsibility, I say that's a joke, because who's going to hold them to account if they don't? If somebody says, I will participate in social responsibility, where are you going to take them? Which court? These people have shown, as an example, that they know how to deal with the courts. They have put all this in the collective agreements with the government. So they know that even if we commit to things that are not binding, it's fine. So I hope I've clarified the difference, that we have a corporate responsibility that aimed at providing the worker the totality of a mine worker. These corporate social recognize that a mine worker has got children, has got a wife, and he needs these children to prosper. They need children to survive. This mine worker, when he's sick, he needs a hospital. You know, if you saw recently at Chambeshi, for example, in Chambeshi, where mine workers were saying, when you fall sick, even when you have an accident, they send them to a government school, to the government hospital. Previously, mine workers did not pay for the education of the children. Today, to go to just come schools like in Kana Trust, how much are you supposed to pay? But if you talk about Kalumbila, I'll give you an example. These companies that you are talking about to say these are good investors, there's no unionized worker who can manage to take their children to that American school. No unionized worker. Because this unionized worker, if you talk about the housing which is in Kalumbila, that house is a mortgage. So if you get 10,000 as your salary, for example, 3,500 goes towards the house. They say it's rent, but you are also paying for the purchase, and you are bound maybe for the next 15 years. So they make sure that you are there for that long. But then if they deduct that amount of money, okay, you are paying rent to the company that employs you. But when you look at the cost of education, it is beyond the reach of many people. So it is a corporate kind of social responsibility. Meaning abalire bread ni bambi elo basabula fe bata nangu ukusa kupisha fe bata leba isa abantu atebadiria. So that's the kind of social responsibility.
It's quite sad, but also you've articulated it very well. Thank you so much. That was great. But the question is now, you worked in the mines, you've been there, you were retrenched, you had nothing because you had loans. So why are the miners borrowing now? Why do miners borrow now?
Yeah, well, when I went into the field, I was interested to understand how, because I mean, if you read much of the literature about mine workers, generally speaking, they have even coined what they have called a mine culture, which is based on careless or reckless spending, as if miners can be identified through their recklessness. Now, when you go down and interact with these people, both underground, remember I told you that I was stuck and they were laughing at me. And they told me that, you see, your experience of being stuck is our experience of loans on an everyday basis. Why do the miners borrow? If a miner gets 3,600 and the cost of living is 8,000, how does they balance this gap? They have to borrow. If a miner does not have a house, today when you come to the Copper Belt, you will find that most miners have got plots. Now, from a neoliberal argument, from a neoliberal perspective, the idea is that, no, well, miners then have changed their mind. And some of the people even attribute President Chilufya and the MMD to have opened our minds. But what they do not understand is that it is not Chilufya and the MMD who opened our minds. It is what is called neoliberalism. And this starts at the point where Margaret Thatcher is elected as Prime Minister in the UK and Ronald Reagan elected as President in the United States. And they say, we have got to remove the state from controlling the means of production and leave it in the hands of the companies. Because according to that neoliberal argument, that's the only time the markets work properly. So in Zambia, the first thing is these people are saying, if I don't have a house, I have to buy or build my own house. If my child has to go to school, because now, if my child is not educated, there's no unskilled labor for this child. Because in the mines, for example, they are bringing bringing advanced technology, which require only skilled labor. I can tell you today, if you go Mumine, there's no one who doesn't have a grade 12 certificate. Everyone has a grade, and there was a particular program just to retrench those who did not have a grade 12 certificate, or those with questionable grade 12 certificates. All of them have been paged away from there. So how do these people meet the gap between the average cost of living and the salaries? These salaries have been eroded by inflation. Inflation tulelanda mutengo wa bunga, mutengo wa fionse fintu mutengo wa salad. So these miners borrow. Where do they borrow from? They go to the bank. When they get a loan to the bank, from the bank, they come and buy a plot. Now, if you look at the highest paid salaried employee in the mines, the highest loan they could get, that is for the highest paid, is only 200 million. 200,000, 200 million before the rebased. Now we're talking about 200,000. 200,000, you buy a plot at 40,000. Then you start building and buy cement. By the time, if you factor in other costs, funeral, sickness, and just school fees for a child who has gone to university and all this kind of thing, you realize that you haven't even reached the window level. This is the experience of most workers. The loan is finished, but this loan must run for 4 years. So what the companies do is that they talk about what they call a refinancing, where they say after 2 years, you qualify for refinancing. Now, this is very important, Patrick, because what happens is that when they go, they have already paid for 2 years. They have already repaid the loan for at least half of the amount that they borrowed. But when they go there, they are given a new loan as if they were not paying anything, but are just given a small amount. It's called refinancing. If you look at the case, these facts are coming from a case that the mine workers took against Stanbic Bank as one example. Now, what happens is that these people will get money that will still not enable them to finish their house. After 2 years now, a further 2 years, which would have now completed that initial four-year loan, they go back to say, oh, well, I need another loan. Then again, they are put into refinancing. Now, here's again, we'll talk about the bank. So the problem is that they borrow. But now, when you look at the net pay, that is the salary which they now remain with because of these loans, it has gone down further. So for an employee who's getting, say, 5,000 and they have to pay 2,300 as loan, they remain with 2,700. With this 2,700, they have to send the children to school, they have to buy food, they have to pay rent, because at the moment they are renting before they move into their own house. Now, with this amount of money, they can't survive. So what do? They go to a microfinance company and borrow. Now, when they take this microfinance company to Mopani, for example, or KCM will say, no, we cannot allow this loan, we can't deduct from your salary. So they make personal arrangements where the employee will have to pay when they get the salary. Themselves, they have to take the money. Otherwise, they will take it from, if they have a savings account at say, Zambia Building Society, from there, that's where this other microfinance will get that money. So at the end of the day, you find that a miner is remaining with 1,800. The lowest paid miner in 2015 got 123 kwacha after the deductions. So the miners are borrowing so that they can buy a house. They can build, they can't buy, they can build a house, but also that they can send their children to school. For example, at Tinkana Trust today, a miner must pay almost 3,000 plus to take their child there at secondary school. Now, where do they get this money? They have to borrow. So now you've got all these companies. If you can't borrow at Stanbic, you can borrow at Bayport. And these banks now, who come to banks anyway, they have introduced different types of loans. So if you have a loan, they can still put a loan. And the behavior of these companies, Mamusha, I want you to ask me a question later about this. But for now, let me just finish your question. The miners borrow in order that they can compensate for the low wages. Since 2000, between 2000 and now, Patrick, I want you to accept this point as very, very valid and very important. Between 2000 and now, the wage increases the wage increases for mine workers have consistently lagged behind increases in inflation. Whereas the salary has increased quite all right. If you look at percentages, throughout ZTCM, salary increments were just around 5%. Now, from 2000, salaries have been increased sometimes even at 50%, sometimes at 40%, before coming to now the figures that we have today. But all these salaries have always been below the minimum bread basket as estimated by the Jesuit Center for Theological Reflections. So that is the state. So the reason, to answer your question, they borrow because they have withdrawn the social benefits. Okay. Now also there's another additional element. Because of the mass retrenchments, where your brother has been retrenched, they have more responsibilities to look after their retrenched brothers. Because as you know, in Zambia, we don't neglect our brothers and our sisters. And also, because they know that if I don't help my friend today, maybe tomorrow you have a job and I'll be the one who's retrenched. Because retrenchments happen every time the copper price falls. Between 2000 and 2015, the number of direct employees has reduced by more than 60%. At the same time, the number of low-paid workers on contracts on short term has increased by over 500%. It was only 10% of the workforce in 1997. Today, labor averages around 60%. In certain companies such as Vedanta and Mopani, in 2018, you'd even find that it had 70% of the workers. And what is different about present subcontracting is that in the past, these subcontracted workers were permanently employed by those subcontracting companies, because you had companies like Pelembe Drilling. These companies employed workers, even if they were contractors, they had very long contracts with ZTCM, and they employed workers on permanent basis. And even when you talk about the corporate social responsibility that was given to direct employees, Washmine, our contractor, it was the same. You wouldn't even differentiate. Sometimes even these workers had even more salaries, higher salaries. The contractor had a higher salary than the permanent workers. And most importantly, they were all unionized, meaning they were protected. Today, the number of unionized subcontract workers is just around 20%. Yet this is the largest workforce. And you know what this means? It means that the unions have been denied the largest number of people who are supposed to strengthen the labor movement. But on top of that, whereas there was only one union before 1997, today in the mines we have 8 unions. At Mopani, for example, Mopani has got a total of 5,000 workers, and about just about 11,000 contract and both of this. Now divide that by 8 unions. Can you imagine? Then we subtract out of that, subtract those who are in senior management who don't belong to unions, and then you have the rest, the few. Divide those, and the unions are also being pitted against the other. If there are conditions of, for example, you find that unions are also fighting for membership. You must understand that the unions survive on member subscription. So what they will do is that when they have fewer members, they want to steal members from the other union. So they are now competing for unionized employees instead of recruiting new members. The problem when you have intra-union fighting, it becomes easy because that union which has got very few people, few members, the employer will just give them money to say, want you to support our position in the negotiations. As a result, the kind of low wages are being reproduced. This is the behavior of these companies, and it is the cause behind. In that article, I argue that the appetite for debt consumption is directly related to the labor policies that these companies have put in place. So for now, let me end there.
That's very interesting. Thank you so much for that knowledge. I never knew about that knowledge. But then you one of the casualties of employment uncertainty and also loans. So you were employed by the mines. You got a loan, and they retrenched you, and they grabbed everything. all the money you got paid as a retrenchment package because you were owing money and you remained with nothing. Now, the question is, Dr. Musonda, how does their employment uncertainty and the behavior of banks affect the everyday life of miners and their families?
You see, it is as if a miner has done something wrong. And it is as if a miner is deserving of punishment. You see, yeah, you know what, Chilufya? We have to understand this. The picture we have, even at the time when a pronouncement is being made that we want to improve, to bring production from the current 800. Because mind you, in the last 20 years, we have only managed to improve production from 237 to 800 in the last 20 years. So to bring this, to triple this, in fact, to quadruple the current production, means that we must first focus our attention on the producers. Because even if these companies will bring the latest type of sophisticated technology, they would still need labor. Because at least, even if it's going to be one person, that person must be able to operate these machines. Now, the underground is a very dangerous place. You must understand this. So, you know, the picture we have today, which I hope the Minister of Mines fully appreciates, is this. It's like a mine worker has done something wrong and he deserves punishment. And here's what I'm saying, and here's why. First, this mine worker has to depend on the global markets. When a miner, I was frequently told, ngabwacha tatuishiba ngatwaya kunchito tatuishiba ngakalawa natukwate nchito ngatwainuka tatuishiba ngabwacha mailo ngatukakwate nchito. That is the extent of the employment uncertainty. Today, because the copper price is high, maybe miners won't have to worry. But the moment they hear on BBC that the copper price has gone down, miners are uncertain. They live on the edge. Miners are worried. Miners are confused about their future. They don't know what will happen to their children. So first, that is one thing we must understand, that we have a mine worker who is constantly worried about their job, about tomorrow. But that's not the only form of uncertainty. They are worried about the calculations. When you look at the increases in the cost of living, they are worried how they are going to manage with these low salaries, because the mining companies keep telling them that we are making losses and we are unable to give you the kind of wages that you demand. And the mining companies keep weakening the unions through bribery, through disintegration, through splintering of unions, and by recognizing several unions, because that's what the law says anyway. So they are worried first about protection. If I committed any problem at the workplace, will I be protected by such a union? They are worried that if I die tomorrow, what will happen to my children? Because I live in a rented house, and my house, which is there, is not complete. But also, they are worried about what will happen if today, with this outstanding loan, they are retrenched tomorrow. What happens? Because in 2015, for example, 10,000 workers were retrenched. But of those, there were about 5,000 or so direct employees. And according to the Ex-Miners Association, during an interview I had with them, I was told that 85% of those retrenched miners lost their retrenchment packages, like I did in 2009, to banks as recovery of the loan. These people went into unemployment with nothing. Those that still had outstanding loans, like myself, who had 1,000, according to them, despite having repaid the loan for over 1 year, there was still an outstanding. The bank continued to push them. And when they refused, they sent them to the CRB as defaulters, credit bureau. Here is a person who has been retrenched. And they use this loan probably to buy a house, which is still incomplete. Then the global economic crisis comes. They lose the job and the bank gets all the money. And when there's a balance, the bank reports these people to the credit bureau so that they cannot borrow money everywhere, because each time they punch their name at any bank, they will say you are still owing money, so you can't borrow. Now, if you have 85% of this, what did the union do in 2015? The union went to government and said, look, our miners have lost them everything. What can you do? The union went back to Mopani and KCM, for example, and they negotiated what was called an extra gratia payment of 18,000. Okay, just to give them 18 pinyaka. This money should not pass through the bank. They went to collect money at the post office. I don't know what arrangements they made, but the idea was that this money, at least let it land in the pockets. In 2015, in the context of the elections of Edgar Lungu, that elections, Edgar Lungu also promised to give them land, plots of land, to say, okay, plots of farmland, and for at least just to help these people. But here is a mine worker who has 18,000 kwacha, because everything has gone. And they have given a piece of land. What would they do with it? They ended up selling the land. And the reason is very simple. For those that received the land, the reason is very simple, because they had no money. But not only that, these workers, remember, as I said, the net pay is reduced. They go to a microfinance, which further reduces the net pay. But they still have children to feed. They still have rent to pay. They borrow from local money lenders, Kaloba. Many people who have borrowed have remained impoverished, because this is what happens. You borrow Kaloba today, you have to pay it at the end of the month. Within that month, if you borrow in June, it should be repaid in June. And the interest rate is 50%. So what do miners do? They go there and borrow. But what do? They have to surrender the ATM, they have to surrender the passport, they have to, if they have, and the NRC, and give their ATM pin to this money lender. Every month end, when the bank deducts, microfinance deducts, the local money lender goes to the ATM and also deducts. The reason they are asked to surrender the NRC is because they don't want them to go inside and get the money over the counter. So that's the reality of a miner whom we are expecting to produce 3 million tons. I do not want to go into their heads, but I'm sure you can speculate the kind of person on whom we rely. We haven't taken this person to the mixed abode of underground production. Uyu muntu tatula mutwala na panshi ba Munsha hiyo. Ba Patrick. Tuchiri turemu achiri pamuru pa surface, achiri munganda. I move with this mine worker underground. And what do I find? I find that because this mine worker was trained in safety, if an underground accident happens, they say we trained this person and he has died of negligence. When this person comes to the hospital, the first thing they will do at the hospital, even if the person is dead, why am I talking about Chilufya?
Yes,
Is
go ahead.
to get a blood sample and take it to the lab for alcohol. So underground, everyone is a drunkard until proven otherwise. Now, even if they find that, okay, this person was not drunk, they will look at, did he follow all the golden rules of safety? Let's say a mine worker has been working with a defective shovel of the loader. or the tires of the dump truck have a problem. And then he goes to the boss, and the boss tells him, we have to produce. So you have to make sure that you produce. So they use their own common sense. The miners do it. It's called tactical knowledge. Now, when production is working, that's fine. But when an accident happens, the blame is on them. What are the consequences? If you died by negligence, your relatives, your family are not entitled to any benefits. And you see, the miners joke about this. As we sat underground at 3,500, there was a story which was told by these miners that one time 5 miners went underground. And as they were working underground, one of them said, let me go to the toilet. And when he went to the toilet, when he came back, he found that a rock had fallen on these 4 and they all died. But luckily, when they did the investigation, they found that it was a natural cause. They were not negligent. And the family was awarded compensation. Now, the funny part of the story was that the wife to the survivor was saying, but what this miner said was that you would have been lucky if you would have got the mine, because most people who die, the blame has been shifted. The blame of dangers has been put on the shoulders of mine workers.
Yeah, so that was excellent. So it looks like a miner is really going through tough times. The environment miners work in, most of them to retire, they are even lucky because there's a lot of dust there, chemicals, and most of them end up having cancer, lung cancer, and other things. But then these mines have withdrawn all those PECs, hospital, and other things, which is really sad. But again, the same miners are highly indebted, going from one lender to the other, even going to Shylocks. And once you borrow Dr. Musonda, even the Bible is clear, you are a slave to the lender. What is the behavior of some of these lenders towards the miners?
Yeah, so before I come to the behavior of the lenders, let me just say, let me give some statistics. In 2018, when I did my research, I found that mine workers, 80% of unionized workers, in fact, 82% of unionized workers in my sample had one form of loan or another. The biggest lender was the bank. Then there was the microfinance. So we have Stanbic, you have Barclays, you have Bayport, and then you also have the building society, and then you have the microfinances. But interestingly, even the unions lend to these workers. All the unions in the mining sector have got what are called ventures, which allow them to give mini-meal on credit. And this mini-meal is deducted from their workers' salaries. I think the threshold is around 800 kwacha. They can get grocery and things for 800. Now, you see, remember, in the context of low net pay, miners go to this, balanda tukuvula, if you ask them. You had put, last time you had put the words used on the copper belt. It's one of them, ukuvula. What this means is that they go and get 8 bags, for example, of millimil. Then they resell at a cheaper price. So let's say a bag of millimil is 150 kwacha. This is what will be deducted. Multiply that by 8. This is what will be deducted from their salary. But they'll sell this bag at 70 kwacha because they're desperate for money to solve immediate problems. Now, the loan is not, the union is not the only lender. Even their employer themselves, the company. Mopani, for example, has got Inkana Football Club and the Mufrira Football Club. So a miner can get a replica jersey on credit, which is deducted from the salary. Now, what do the miners do? They go and get 7 jerseys. And they go, if a jersey is 500, they will sell it at 300. Then those that have children at Incana Trust, that has to be deducted every month from their salary. This is what I'm saying. It's like Shimani, Babe for Alufiani. Shimani has made a mistake to everyone, such that Shimani deserves punishment. Okay, who is not getting something from the story I've just described? Who is not getting something from this low salary of a miner? If a miner decides to keep money in the bank, every month, there are bank charges. It's not like ukumudiva bachilufya pati ngwabika olupia lwambo kula kunonga wabika olupia 2 years wabika 2 pin tawakaisangi, even if you did not withdraw, because they will be deducting every month 2%. I'm around there. Now, if this is the kind of person who is going underground, I'm wondering how we expect this person to produce 3 million tons. This person is surviving by the thread. This person is troubled. You know, there are some mine workers, I'll tell you this. Before we even talk about the other lenders, I also want to invite you to a further, what I'm saying is like a mine worker, and I'm going to write an article about this. It's like a mine worker has done something deserving of punishment. That will be the title of this article. And this is what is going to be there. Apart from the bank getting their loan, the microfinance, the building society, the loan, the union, the employer. Let us now go back to the mobile phone. On the phone, if they run out of talk time, they have to borrow talk time. But if they borrow talk time for 2 kwacha, they have to pay 3 kwacha. But okay, it's not, I don't know the figure, but they have to pay an amount when repaying. So when they recharge the phone, they have to pay that. It looks negligible. Some don't even think about it. But if you add those figures annually, you find that it's a substantial amount. Not only that, there's now mobile money lending.
Oh my God.
So some miners, what they have done as a way to survive, they have 3 SIM cards. Zamtel, and they have registered for mobile money. Airtel have registered for mobile money. MTN, they have registered for mobile money. Now, what do? Every month, when they get a salary, they have to repay. Because the idea, again, is that when you repay, if you borrowed 500, you repay, then you qualify maybe for 600 or 700 like this. So this is, have you seen the incentive?
Yes.
So now, miners who now, when they reach a point where they don't have money to repay, they will borrow from Zamtel to pay Airtel, and vice versa. But at the end of the day, they live in a day of debt, and every month they have to borrow and borrow and borrow, and the life.
Just hold that thought. That brings me to the next question. What does the life of debt at individual level and that of the national debt affect our Zambian culture?
Yeah, so you know, it's not funny. I'm laughing not because it is fun. No, I'm laughing because I wonder how we don't question all these things. Just to finish on the mobile money, when I put 200 kwacha in my mobile money, I cannot get that 200 kwacha. I have to get maybe 195 kwacha. This money which I had put to say I want to bank it, have you seen already? They have taken it. If my daughter asks for 100 kwacha and I send her that 100 kwacha, for sending that money I have to pay a certain amount. But also when she's receiving that money, she won't receive the 100 kwacha. So now if you've seen on Facebook, they are saying some people are funny. When you send them money, but they are it's like they don't even consider where this money goes. Now, this is the kind of, we live in what is called a creditocracy, where every consumption is wrapped around debt. That's the kind of life we are living in. Now, we cannot think about increasing production or increasing any form of production in a context where people are uncertain about their finances, are uncertain about their jobs, are uncertain about their everyday life in their homes. There are fights in the homes because a miner might have gotten a loan and tried to invest in a business where now you have these crooked people who come and say, once you invest in the diamonds, once you invest in the emeralds, then you are going to multiply your money, then you can. So he borrows quickly and does that, and then that guy disappears. It's like a miner has done something and deserving of punishment. Now, to come to your question, where we're talking about indebtedness. So we now have among the cultures that we have in Zambia, among the cultures, we now have a loan culture. Tell me what is not borrowed. Talk time is borrowed. The phone is borrowed. Your salary is borrowed. Everything, you see, we are not even talking about ukukongola patuntemba, because that's the everyday life of the mine workers. Mine workers have even now learned how to negotiate their debts. They borrow from A to pay C, and this kind of life. That is why, even where you are in the UK, particularly in the context of the economic crisis in 2008, most people lost houses, even in the US. Repossession. Most have filed for bankruptcy. And these are the problems that we have. So that kind of system that Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan is now showing us the consequences. And therefore, we must be very, very careful as we put our foot or both our feet in this neoliberal feet. We need to be very careful, Patrick, because we are in a crazy, crazy world. Everything has to be financed. Even when you have money, they will tell you, interest. No, I have money to pay. No, but why pay if you can use that money for something else? Why can't you just use it to buy cement and get this phone on Congole? Because and then well, it makes sense. This 5,000, let me buy. Everyone, even those who are unemployed, including our unborn children, have got a debt. Now let us come to the national debt. Zambia has got 18 million people. And today, as I'm talking, Zambia has got about $18 billion debt. And if you include corporate debt that has been borrowed not by government, but where government has said, okay, we as a guarantor, we have a 30 billion debt. So you can imagine how much each Zambian owes. So we live a country that is governed by debts. You know why? Because debt has got conditions. The IMF has given us conditions. But even the banks give conditions to the lenders. Even at household level, they give conditions. Now we live in a life of conditions. We live in a life aimed, already fashioned, already structured in a way that it only enriches certain fewer people. And I find it crazy why we don't interrogate the amount of interest charged by these banks, the amount of fake charges charged by money lenders. I am depositing money to my child who will not receive the exact amount of money. But even when sending that money, they've charged me. Why do we pay no attention as a people to this small kind of stealing? These people are stealing. They have financialized our lives. It's not modernity. It's not modernity at all. We are living a crazy world where people are stealing from us every day. If
I think what you said is very important. But again, we've got a new government now, and they they are looking at a lot of reforms, and I think they need to reform a lot of things, and I'm going to ask you on, because we need solutions to this, and I'm going to ask you as part of the solutions when we come to the end. We're talking of labor laws, which you've mentioned. They there are no labor laws in the country, and then you've mentioned about interest. Here in the UK, everything is regulated. Interest rates are very low, and banks cannot charge astronomical interest rates. They will be penalized. And then when I transfer money from one bank to another, there are no charges. When I put money in the bank, the last thing the bank would do is to deduct any charges. There are no charges in the bank, because you're giving money to the bank, and the bank is using that money to reinvest. So why should they charge you interest? Instead, they should give you interest. So at the end of the day, I'm gonna ask you, you know, if you can give us some of the solutions um, uh, to that. But then before we go towards the end, there's just one question I wanted to ask you. I've heard rumors that the debt swap has been cancelled, but the government hasn't said. It hasn't come from the government. I saw it from a newspaper called what do you call National Daily? Is it Daily National?
Daily Nation.
Daily Nation, yeah. But then I've got a question for you. What about the debt swap for the civil servant? Was it a good solution given the emerging loan culture?
You see, this is crazy. This is a problem when we want to govern by political interests. The recklessness of the PF was unremitting and remorseless. Kwali bati umuntu achitefia bulokulondoloka but nakwatamo kalya kabuntu kakumona nti ifinstretefyo lero teba PF. In the first place, they implemented the debt swap before the Bankers Association of Zambia. There's that bankers association could agree about the terms and how this was going to be implemented. They shifted. The thing is this country has got a debt of they left a debt of over 14 billion. Then what did they do? They went to KCM and liquidated the company, taking over 2.5 billion debt. They bought Mopani, taking over 1.5 billion plus interest. Then what did they do? They came now to the banks and tell the banks, all these loans that our workers have, shift them on us. Now, if you look at our budget, 40% of our budget was accounted for by debt repayment. And in November 2020, we had defaulted on a Eurobond. Who does that? How attainable was it? Because you see, this is the culture you're talking about, where you have people who are suffocated by debt at individual level, and the company also is the country is suffocated by debt. Then you want to just multiply the debt on the state. Also, this same debt, what I'm saying, we have a very dangerous loan culture. Look at I'll give you examples like Mopani, for example. Mopani is going to borrow money from its bank in Switzerland. And then they will borrow expensively from their own company. They will charge even the interest rates that may not even be charged from the country of origin. Because it's their own company. But you know why? Because this helps them in tax calculation. So they will make profit on the loan repayment. They are using debt. You see how debt is a dangerous vehicle of exploitation. Debt is a system. It's a tool for impoverishing us. At the same time, the PF went to borrow from commercial lenders who demanded high interest rates and short repayment period. We have a country suffocated by debt and citizens suffocated by debt. That's the country we have. So the debt swap was crazy. It's total madness. It's something that is unsustainable. If you can remove subsidy, if you can remove tariffs on electricity, if you can do subsidy on electricity and energy, how can you sustain a debt swap which affects only a fraction? If you look at the employment figures, they'll tell you that only about 12 or 9% of the people are in formal employment. The rest, 89, 90% of the people are in informal jobs. And we're talking about just those people who are in the employment age between 15 and 45. What about those who are below 15? Because Zambia's almost 50% of people are young people. So those who are below 15, they are not catered for. Those who are above 55, who have retired, they are not catered for. Then you look at this just 9% and you say, government. The problem with this is that it was going to undermine everything that the government was going to do. Everything. It was complete madness. It was unsustainable. I don't even know how those people, some of them were even bankers. They worked at the Bank of Zambia. They are very educated people with PhDs. You see, this is the problem. When you do your PhD and your PhD is concentrated on numbers, that's why when they are negotiating, let them bring people who can talk about the life of the people, the everyday life of the people. That's why I said, even those people who are in the communities, bring them when discussing these issues. Because the problem when you go with educated people, you are told, according to Kapushan, have you followed what Kapushan says? Have you followed, according to my calculation, the break-even point? And what is that? That's total nonsense to a person who lives in the community. The debt swap was unthinkable.
Okay, yeah. Before we come towards the end and we talk about the solutions, corporate social responsibility. Here in the UK, I think it's done differently. Here in the UK, organizations, also big organizations, they want to make sure that workers are happy and workers are fit, mentally, physically, to do their jobs. And you find that most of the successful companies all over the world, they make sure that they look after their workers, not only salaries. So what organizations do, and that's what this mine should have done. The moment you've got, say, 5,000, 20,000 workers, and you go to a lender, there is no way the lender will give you the highest interest. They have to give you the lowest interest, because that's what organizations do here. They go for what is known as salary finance. They go to an institution. We employ 5,000 people or 20,000 people. Give us the lowest interest, not the interest Shylocks are giving. Because what they're interested is, they want their workers not to worry about money, but to concentrate on work. And if you subject workers to high interest rates, then they'll continue borrowing from one place to another. And not only that, they provide counseling before somebody borrows, and training also. Do the mines do that? That's the question I was trying to come to. Do they provide counseling? And then if they discover that a worker is highly indebted, do, do they find a cheaper source of income, loans, so that that miner is saved from? Because how is he going to perform underground if he's thinking about, paying the Shylocks or paying the banks, thinking of how he's going to borrow money to pay, the other lender? Over to you.
You see, vashwari mo vintu kuti waseka nochati pantu nafiwa. What I don't know if you allow me to go a bit historical. Around the 1900s, the global economic system was called a laissez-faire system. And this system was widely, practiced or deployed in the developed world, in the UKs and the Americas, Europe and America. And it was a system where the state had no role at all in managing the say the mines or the means of production. The state stayed away. That system crashed in the 1930s. If you have heard of the Great Depression, for mine workers on the Copper Belt, it led to loss of jobs. Now, from the 1930s, they now entered into what was called the Keynesian model, a Keynesian system. If you living in the UK, as you are coming from, I think, as you are coming to London from Nottingham, I think, or somewhere there, there's a place called Kent. I don't know what they call it.
Kent.
Yeah?
Kent.
Is
it Kent?
Yeah, but there's John Maynard Keynes.
Milton Keynes.
Yes. So that man is the one who came up with this system where I said the state must have a role in controlling the market by having means of production. So from 1930, we had what was called the standard employment relationship created in these developed countries. So now you have the state having a role in managing the economy, but also recognizing trade unions and also giving welfare to the workers. So they have housing, they have all these social benefits. So we had a welfare state starting from the 1930s. And so we come into the Second World War. This continues, especially after the Second World War, because you have many countries destroyed and this kind of thing. So there's a deliberate loan given by the World Bank and these countries to develop in fact, the World Bank was formed to help reconstruct Europe. That was the aim of the World Bank. But after that, it started conditional lending in the 70s, as we will talk about. The UK was one of the first countries to borrow from the World Bank. And when it was given conditions, from that time, UK from the World Bank. They don't borrow from them because of the conditions, because it came to undermine the Great Britain. Now, this system, what is now called a welfare system, which is based on providing free things, free water, and all these kind of things, reached a crisis in the 1970s. We have another Great Depression. That's when now you have Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan coming in. And they come with these neoliberal ideas, where I've talked about conditional lending and this. I'm sure I lived in Belgium for 5 years. And I know what is happening. I mean, Belgium is just 45 from Germany, a few minutes from Holland, 2 hours by train to Paris. And I mean, so you could, this was the area that, very proximal. I learned that the life there in terms of social welfare, from the time I went to Belgium in 2016, I used to pay for a bus ticket €5. Up to the time I left in 2021, it was still €5. That does not mean that it is maintained by a perfect market. No. Children who are in college, they are given an allowance. They are paid.
Yes.
Now, if you want to compare what those guys in Europe are saying, look at the internet. Where you are, I'm sure, internet you pay very minimum. It just looks like, look at when you go in every shop, every mall, there's internet. So meaning, now for me, even just to talk to you, I have to struggle to look for just connection. Now, even if I want to learn on the same platform if I want to learn, I am a PhD here and a PhD in Europe, studying from a European university and someone studying from a Zambian university. First, you have challenges of internet, just internet. You have challenges of books, just to access the books to read so that your brain is opened. But there are free access to all the books. So the challenge, we have global inequalities which are not being addressed. When they come here, they are telling us remove subsidies, remove for people who are already poor. And you are enjoying subsidies. Look at the inequalities in trade. I hope the Minister of Agriculture is going to address this. The World Trade Organization is a useless organization. And this is what they are doing. When you want to take your goods to America, for example, they have put sanctions. America will put certain sanctions on certain goods because they don't want to kill their industry. So what they will do is that this meat does not meet our standard, merely just to prevent your meat from. Our meat is the best. But you find
Yes.
that to find that is very difficult.
Mm.
I could not find mini meal. Belgium. I couldn't find mini meal of Simba milling. At least there in the UK, you're able to have Simba milling. I know maybe and the other milling companies, but I could not find that in Belgium. Ubunga na de wale ufika watini flour. Ngawana yo wadi. Bule ufika watini ini flour. They have securitized their. That's why they have created the European Union to securitize themselves against us foreigners. But now, when you look at what they are telling us, remove this, remove that. If we lived in an equal world, yes, it makes sense. It makes sense. I would buy a bus ticket. Look at the efficiency of the public transport in Europe. I would buy a ticket at 48 euros and I would move the entire Belgium. For the whole month, I would buy a train 10 tickets cheaply and I would move from all over. I would move all over Belgium. Now, what is happening? If we look at what they did in the 1930s, the Keynesian model, it has not completely diminished in Europe. Whereas in Africa, they want to tell us as if for us we were at their level. And you know what they tell you? You know why they tell us to do all these things? They think that we are wasteful, we are unreasonable, and I mean, to be respectful to them, I think they think we are foolish. Because you see, if you have statistics that are showing that 60% of Zambians are now living on less than $2 per day, you cannot bring this kind of thinking where, okay, just look at what I explained. The banks have come. These are rich banks. Some of them have their roots in the UK, some in the US. And they have come here. And look at, when you just put money in your bank, they will choose that every month they'll cut something. When you are getting a loan, they'll say you have to pay insurance. And yet when you lose your job, they'll get your money. Then insurance, yeah. Why do people pay? Is it not to insure the loan? Because the miners are told you need insurance. You know what they do? They insure the loan. And for sure, they go to the insurance company to collect the money. But they would have also collected your pension, your retrenchment packages.
Yes.
What is this? This is crazy. We need to focus on the banks.
Yeah.
The banks are the only.
Now, hold that thought. Let's look at the solutions. We've talked about corporate social responsibility with the mines, the loans, poor condition of work, which is labor laws, and then what should we do to resolve those issues? And then lastly, before I bring in one of the guests panels, Mr. Joseph Nyundu, are we going to achieve with this kind of issues? Poor labor laws, miners are indebted, their welfare is bad, the corporate social responsibility is non-existent. Are we going to achieve? What are the solutions to that first? And then are we going to achieve the 3 million ambitious target by the government? 3 million tons? Over to you.
Yeah, first, the thing is that nobody will claim to have all the solutions. But what I would want to say is that first, a diagnosis is a first step towards understanding the problem and towards finding a solution. We need to relook at our labor laws. we need to provide security of employment. In the UK, when people come and they get a mortgage, it's because they know they are going to work up to the end of their lives, and then they'll have a job and they'll have life. Here in Zambia, the building companies, they'll give you money to go and build a house, which they know that you never finish. And you have to go back. So let us first look at employment security in the mines, for example. Let us look at the profit with the view of ensuring that the profits are also equally distributed among the producers. 3, let us nationalize or increase the stake in some of the companies, because at least we will know the profit and we are looking at our own Zambians. If we cannot, for example, improve their salaries, we can at least provide, some incentives. We are, for example, a good move already, free education, okay? But then we must look at quality education. How do we improve the quality? It's not merely having numbers of people, but what kind of quality of education? Where are these children sitting as they learn? Do they have computers? If you come to a child learning in primary and nursery school where you are, you find that they've even got computers. They've started learning computers at primary. Now, this is not the case. In Zambia, a computer is written on the board. This is the mouth, this is the what? The drawn using a chalk. In my view, we need to increase our stake, for example, in our key economic sectors, the mines. We need to have a role in the tourism and all these other aspects, okay? But also, we need also to deliberately allow Zambians to invest in these mines. When you look at the Eurobond, for example, the Eurobond is public money. It's pensioners' money. Part of the money to Eurobond is money that you save every month from your salary as pension. And now these pensioners, they didn't know where to take their money. In 2008 especially, there's this global crisis, and they are reluctant to lend. So they remained with a lot of money, which they had nowhere to take to. So they were looking, the first Eurobond which Mr. Sata collected with Mao Sampa and all these, Mr. Chkwanda, may so rest in peace. They didn't even have a plan. They just went and they were given the money without a plan. They came to start thinking of the plan after they had borrowed. Oh, they sent to Pange Zambia Railways, sent to Teshan. But what I'm trying to say is that if we can use public money from the UK, even when you talk about Glencore borrowed $8 billion. And in one day it had $8 billion, which it came to invest. If we can use borrowed money through Glencore, we can use borrowed money through the Eurobond. Why can't we borrow from the Zambian market? Put more Glencore on the Lusaka Stock Exchange. People like me, people like you, and everyone, each and every 2 quarters. Because when you share those dividends at the end of the year, for me, if you give me 20,000, at least I'll build the house up to that level. I'll wait until the other year to come and finish. At the end of the day, there's something. Fourth, I don't know which number, if I'm on the 4th point, is let us first understand that foreigners are not interested in improving our lot. They are not. Let us be careful when they praise us. Because when they praise us, they are telling us that you are foolish, you are idiots. That's what they are telling us. Because they see that you are not thinking. Let us not be misled by their praises. Let us first factor in that fact. When they come here, they have not come here for us. They've come here on their own terms. If you look even in the 1940s, the kind of life that they lived, these people, when they came in the mines, compared to the kind of life, it has not changed. It is the same. I'll give you an example. In 1975, the Chinese, what did the Chinese do? They helped us build Tanzania-Zambia railways. And they have been lending money since 1964 to African countries without any interest. They are bad employers, but they are good friends. At least, if you check, you can count there's Levi Mwanawasa Stadium. There's Levi Mwanawasa Hospital. At least there's something you can point, even if these are bad employers. Tell me what these colonialists who have come back again, what have they built? Even just from 2000, what have they built? They have built only 13.1 billion was invested in the mines from 2000 up to 2015. They built infrastructure that's just leading directly to the mines. Mumone msebo ba Patrick nga mwafuma fe misebo fina ngfe muno mwine fe mupita kopa monse misebo shali mbauka. We borrowed money to build the roads, and these roads are now being destroyed by copper and heavy mobile equipment that these criminals have brought. We must understand that ababantu tabaisa for our own interest first and foremost. So meaning in dealing with them, we should always have a 50-50 approach. Ukubula mine, mwayabula mine, ukubapela 100% consumption. Takwaba, that's crazy. Where are you going to get the money from? Mining contributes 26% towards revenue. That's a lot of money. The largest contributor is agriculture, yes, but we must look at mining because it's the largest contributor of forex. It means that forex helps us in balancing the foreign exchange rate. If people are talking about the foreign exchange rate, if we have enough forex, yes, we're going to. When we allow capital flight to say, profiting you can send them for feed. And if we always allow, like for example, they'll buy capital equipment from UK. They can multiply the cost because that we ship. My shop of baby them paying. Money. For example, mobile equipment. Kuti bayashita kuri company yabo.
Yes.
Which means in Gairi party 400 million. Tibalanda momulembe chini 800 million.
Yes.
Eno nomba lava isa kuno. Pakupenda tax. Bafumia kwa ila 800 million. Wao tualikuwa tenko kuri company yabo. So momone for a profit number ya kulia. So
yeah,
if
they are transferring both the profits and the losses to their own companies. Yeah, so that they create more losses here and they create less sales.
Yes.
Like who would think Switzerland on the world map, World Bank details, information, data, Switzerland is the largest producer of exporter of copper in the world.
Yes.
But you know what they do? Vendetta and the rest, they transfer price copper. They sell copper to them at a lower price because Switzerland is a tax haven, so the tax is lower. Tax is higher in Zambia, and then Switzerland now sells the copper at a higher price and becomes the largest exporter of copper in the world. Yeah. So that was
just to add on that one.
Yeah.
Just to add on that one. You're in a copper land, it never reaches Switzerland. It never, ever.
No, it's on paper. It's on paper. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you so much for that. I'll bring you back for closing remarks. I've looked at the questions from our viewers. There are no questions in there, but I've got our guest here, our friend Joseph Nyundu. Joseph, over to you. Questions, remarks, anything. It's over to you. I've given you 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me again, Dr. Musonda. Thank you. That was very brilliant. Mr. Patrick Chilufya, thank you for hosting, and everyone else on the panel, and to the viewers that have stuck with us up to now. Thank you very much for your support and your audience. I followed very keenly and long enough from the time I joined in a bit later, and I'm very happy, and I've learned quite much, especially in the mining policy. And following through what you've said, I think we set ourselves in a trap on the mining policy. We gave away so much because the main stake in any mining discourse is ownership. because the person that gets the biggest share of ownership in any mining discourse is the one that gets the biggest share in profits. It never goes both the two ways. The bigger the share in ownership, if it's an absolute BOT, where you build to own or you purchase to own, and there's no triple P involved, it's fully owned by, and this is why most people that bought mines, especially our mines, they went for absolute ownership, because they knew that with absolute ownership, they can control the market. Whether it's a small, medium, or large scale mining operation, the main important component that gives you absolute return is ownership. The bigger the ownership, the more you take control of the market, and the more you take control of all the wealth that comes from the mine. Now, going back to the issue of social corporate responsibility, it is good to have social corporate responsibility, but that is just a little share from what is realized from the mines or from whatever business is being run. And since we are specifically looking at the mining business, it takes me back to the 1970 Margaret Thatcher's introduction of liberalizing the mortgage crisis. And Zambia has not resolved the mortgage crisis of the 1970, which I think Dr. Musonda did run through in a way as well, well articulated. We haven't resolved that. And that is what has, that's what gave way into spilling into when the UNIP came out of power, and we had this economy being liberalized, literally, theoretically, but practically, we were giving away our economic sovereignty on a large scale during that privatization. And just to give an accompanying thought so that people can literally open their eyes more. If you remember, one of the companies that went alongside the privatization process was Zambia Airways. And Zambia Airways did not make losses in that year. I think they had actually declared, there's a figure of either 25 million or something, the old one, in dividends. It should be 2.5 or 25 million, something. There's a figure of 2.5 in millions, which was declared in dividends in that year. And I could clearly even remember that they had, I think, 3 ATR aircrafts. There was a 737. I think there was even a 747. There was a couple of good aircrafts, which only small percentages, even with McDonnell Douglas in the US, we had a very little money left to pay, which literally was very small compared to the dividends that we declared in that year. But the company was sold. Why? It's because over the years, we have been having our leadership going to these conferences, UN, World Bank meetings, and everything to get the bare minimum benchmarks. And like Dr. Musonda said, there is no way we can come out of this quagmire we are if we are missing the concept. Somebody has a blueprint of what's being done. And that blueprint is what's being given to us as a bare minimum. These Millennium Development Goals, whatever, those are bare minimums being given to us because we appear to give a posture of not thinking for ourselves, what we want for ourselves, what works for us. And in a global world, we're not saying we push away Europe, push away Asia, push away everyone. No, the world is now interdependent, especially with technology. And if you look at the mining sector itself, there is now what they call precision mining, where the satellites that are hanging up there are able to locate magnetically and see where the copper, gold, and everything is. So this, all this fight for space is not just for people going to space adventure, or Jeff Bezos has gone, the owner of Virgin Airlines has gone, he's taken a flight with people. No, that anybody that puts up a satellite there is using fiber optic, using the magnetic imaging system to see where all our minerals are. By the time somebody is coming with a briefcase or with a check to negotiate where to get the land and do mining, they already know the survey, the planning, where everything is. And we can't run away from the policy of government where you cannot buy land that has got mineral wealth that belongs to the nation somewhere. The government has to take that. But all these principles have been, either illegally or immorally ignored. and we've given away our mineral sovereignty to people from outside. Now, we're not saying we can't work with outsiders, but what we're trying to say, what do we realize? 26% towards our GDP of mineral contribution is quite substantial, but it's not enough. It's not enough because social corporate responsibility is part of social spending, and which is a component that I did refer to last week when we had the discussion, which this continues through. And I said, in order for us to have more social spending, we need to dismantle our national debt. Because our national debt takes, I think, 40-something%, if not the 7+ there, which is way above the threshold. And if you look at the previous regime, there was a lot of protocols. You know, there are Blue Declaration and the Maputo Declaration, which talks about the 10 and 15% of the budgetary allocation annually towards agriculture and education, health, and all those protocols were broken. So meaning we are operating on an autopilot economically. Everything that comes, you know, the exchange rate problems cannot be well solved if the monetary policy at Bank of Zambia is fluctuating and not stable. And because in our mind, we've always thought that the dollar being low in exchange rate is what the economy is. But actually, it's the stability of the market that holds the economy. Because when the market is stable, everything else, including copper prices, whether it goes up and down, that is an issue of windfall taxation from Ministry of Finance. They can implement that policy, which the Magande group did during Manawasa. So where if the profits go up, what you pay in mineral royalties should also go up. If it goes down, it should go down. Because like I said, the mining business, the mainstay, the anchor of wealth in mining is control. So I'm running a mine and I'm fully in charge of it. I own it completely. I'm in charge of the wealth of the mineral in that particular perimeter where I'm mining my minerals. So they knew that's why when they bought the mines, I think they said we are going to pay you, I think they was sold for 25 million at the time or something. And then within 3 months or so, the profits were made and paid in full. And now we're getting 0.something% and stuff like that, which were revised along the way. That what they knew, what they did was when they crashed the market, because they control the market. So when they crash the markets, then they create an artificial solution, which looks like a solution to us, because we find ourselves in this trap where, for instance, what happens now in relation to before, they would say we're going to lay off workers. Now, like Dr. Musonda was saying, an employee doesn't care the mechanism of how they will lose the job. What they care is if I lose the job, I have no income. I have no income. My children won't go to school. I won't pay rent. I won't pay this. They do not, just like citizens in the country, they don't understand all the yeah in parliament of how, you argue. What they want is a meal affordable, is a cooking oil affordable. That's what a citizen cares about, because they already voted for you. So you have to do your job to stabilize the economy. So as long as we are not in control of the banks, which is a component that Dr. Musonda mentioned, and to tell you on that one, there is no point. This is why these banks don't lend money to people in the markets from Soweto or City Market and all that. You have to have a job like an accountant, maybe a minister, and most of the, even to get a car loan from Toyota Zambia, it's very rare that somebody at City Market can get it or Intercity can get it. It has to be people that are probably cabinet ministers, because they know that they've got a stable income, which no matter how long it takes, it will come and they can get their money back. So and it comes back to what I said last week, we are not in charge of the economy. So the person that's in charge of the economy is calling the shots. The lending system of money, the loans, and if you look at the World Bank and the IMF, these two institutions, one is headed by an American, one is headed by a European. It's always like that. And that's why the headquarters is in New York, the other one is in DC. It's always like that. There's no debate to that, who heads which one of the two. It's just the two regions of the world that head the two institutions. And this should make us to wake up, to say these institutions are not there to enrich us. And if you look at the banks where they bank this money, which we pay back as loans, the banks are not in Zambia. So this is a business. But how do we get out of here? We need to run away from the debt trap. That is the first step. Get out of the debt trap, dismantle the debt, restructure it, and cushion our social spending so that our fiscal gap, our spending and our revenue, the two can meet. That's why the Bank of Zambia and Ministry of Finance, these two have to work together to control the monetary and fiscal policy. But at all the indices draw back to exactly what we discussed last week, which is part of what Dr. Musonda has discussed, of stabilizing the market, stabilizing the economy, starting to grow the GDP, possibly to a double digit, above 10%. I do not think we should be hanging within the 7.5, which Manawasa had. We should beat that. GDP, if you look at the GDP of Britain, Turkey, they are into their 40 whatever percent, even when the inflation rates are there, but you don't feel it because the total sum of wealth, of goods and services produced in a year can support the economy. And that environment comes back to which Mr. Chilufya can agree with me, like the stability of the markets in the UK. It allows SMEs to grow because the interest rates for borrowing SMEs to grow their businesses and create more employment and get more revenue. And as people get more revenue, they will do more purchasing. The purchasing, currency of the money goes high. This all dates back to the employees in the mines. So whatever they get, if it doesn't conform to what the current inflation rates are in terms of goods and services purchasing, it still it swallows us back into the poverty. But there was a question that was asked that I liked, to say, how does the national debt cause a ripple effect on the purchasing power of what people in the mines earn and also how the mines operate? And this is how it works. If the country does not have enough money for social spending, going to medications, education, building capacity, everything, skills, and developing SMEs, the economy remains squeezed. And as long as it remains squeezed, it's not breathing, it gives room for control from other people entirely. And if you look at the GDP of the entire Africa, it's smaller than the GDP of California. The GDP of California, I think, is about 3.2 trillion, and the GDP of Africa, even when you're on paper, they say it's one of the fastest growing now. It's around 2.6, 2.8 trillion, smaller than a state. So when it comes to lending us money, a Chinese president one time lined up about 50 presidents in Africa with just $60 billion. What is that money? That could be money for one country as a national budget, at least. But what happened? It's money that was being lent, or Zambia gets 12, this one gets 5, this one gets 6, small chunks were being played around, tossed like a chessboard. Why? Because our GDPs are small, and telling us to remove subsidies, which they give in the places as benefits, as social welfare, as handouts, whichever names they call them. It is still a financial support system from government. It's still a form of a financial share being given as a reward to the citizens. It's part of the social contract for human development, which is part of what we discussed last week. So all these things are happening because the markets are stable, the economies are stable. Copper is a diminishing resource. Once you dig it from the ground, you sell it, its value goes with the money. But now we have to start having a deliberate planning process. It doesn't matter who mines the copper at the moment, but as a country, we know the world is going green, electric. There's electric cars that are coming in now. And Mr. Chilufya can agree with me. I think by 2030 in Britain, all companies will start manufacturing fully electric cars. Right now, it's a policy now. Every car must manufacture a percentage of electric cars. That's why every time you're on the UK roads, you even see a Peugeot, which is electric. You will see a Vauxhall electric, Ford electric. Every company is electric, because by 2030, each country, by 2035, I think Germany. So countries have shared this green economy production threshold of knowing when to go completely green. And part of London right now has been zoned for ultra emission payments and stuff like that. All these things are not just for fining people if they don't pay or they drive through. No, it is to drive people mentally towards the green economy, knowing that this is where the world is going crypto and green. But how do we now use that as a comparative advantage as Zambia? We are the 5th largest producer of copper, I think, is it in the world or Africa? And
in the world. We're second in Africa.
Second in Africa.
And third in the world.
And the more copper we produce,
we are 7th in the world.
even if we said we are targeting to produce 5
million
metric tons, what we are going to get back, the percentage is still very small because the ownership is not absolute to us. But how to kill that intermediary in between is now to bring in value addition ourselves, because the world is going green, and from copper is where the cables, cobalt, and all that come from. So if we now come in between there to say, oh, actually, you're mining the copper in our country, happy days. We're going to put an industry here. If you need copper cables, instead of them going to be made in Delhi or in Shanghai, can that company come and open an overseas manufacturing license, allow us to bring that, like they do in South Africa, VW, Mercedes, Rwanda is now doing the same. It's the same concept.
Just hold that thought, Joseph. You there? Somebody has spoken about Zambia and Congo. We are the largest producer of. When you combine Congo and Zambia, we're probably the largest in the world, and we are next door to each other. And then it's talked about smart cars. You rightly said Scotland has already passed a law, 2030, no diesel petrol cars. And you're also right, all the companies now, Toyota, I drive a Mercedes-Benz electric car.
Yeah.
So everybody is going electric, and we've got the minerals. Why can't we start taking part in there? 50% of all the mines, because if we are producing 3 million tons and 50% revenue comes to Zambia, not only that, value addition, we're making batteries for those electric cars, because the battery is the biggest component of that electric car, because when you're charging, that battery is storing the electricity. And we've got the minerals, Congo and Zambia. Why can't Congo and Zambia come together and put up a factory in Mansa or somewhere in between? And then instead of selling copper to Switzerland, most of that copper will be sold to the countries that are adding value. Over to you, Joseph. Continue.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very, very grateful of that thought, and that it was well picked up. So for us to kill the cancer of indebtedness, we have to grow our economy. But the point we're in now is that we have been left in a debt trap. So we're in this debt quagmire, which there is no other way but to dismantle it in order for us to start growing the economy. Because no matter how big the national budget can be announced, but if the percentage of what the threshold for pay debt is still bigger than what it should be, because it's all about the percentage of the national budget. If you right now, the national budget was read at 177 billion. By the time the dollar was 19 kwacha, that's still less than 10 billion. That is still less than the net worth of Abramovich, who was running Chelsea, who was worth 12 billion. British Airways made a net worth of 15 billion pounds before COVID, between year 2019-2020, which is within the last 2 years of tax period. So look at an airline making a net annual turnover profit twice bigger than our annual budget of 20 billion.
Joseph, the budget of NHS is 110 billion.
So as long as we are following the minimum benchmarks given to us there, 7th development plan, you read a good speech there, they clap, they praise you, whatever, that doesn't change the economy. The economy should be in the hands of the Zambian people. If the mineral way of actually, since today we're talking about mining, let me stress on this. Capital mining projects, bigger like Mopani, KCM, and all those, are difficult to get an ordinary Zambian, an SME, to run them. Those require heavy machinery, sophisticated machinery, international cooperation, but that does not mean that we have to give away completely. We need to have some form of leverage percentage, which is substantial enough for us to have ownership and to have control. Even if we took 60, they took 40, or we have 51, they have 49, as long as the majority, or it's almost equal, then it gives a voice to the markets, to profits, to revenue, and to turnover, and to control, to ownership, to employment levels. Because what makes individual citizens to flourish in their own personal economy is having an income, is to earn. And when a person earns, they will spend. And when there's spending, then the buying power of the money within the country becomes strong. And that's what will control the prices of goods. In England, for the last over about 15 years I've been here, bread has never gone above £2. If it increases after 5 years, it's just 2 pence or 1 pence. You can imagine in 5 years, it will increase 1 pence. You will buy cooking oil, a liter of a certain brand of oil, same price for 5 years. It doesn't change. Why? Because the markets are stable, the economy is stable, and because of each city in the UK, for instance, is known strategically for something. For instance, Northampton, where I lived last year, is known for leather production. That was their comparative advantage. Derby, they make Rolls-Royce engines for all aircrafts, most aircrafts, General Electric there, for all these passenger planes we took. So a comparative advantage, and we cannot just depend on one component of just copper. Even if we increase it to 5 million metric tons, that the turnover that we are getting from the profit is still smaller in comparison to the budget size and also to the percentage that we're getting from it, because the ownership and to be a little bit specific there, someone can get there's a license to mine copper. Okay, Zambia has got gold, emeralds, next to each other in these soils. Those things are not declared. Now, if you look to sell at $6,000, look at how big you need the metric tons of copper. When you just need less than 300 carats of pure emerald to pay off the debt that Zambia owes. Less than 300 carats of emerald, pure emerald on the market, put it on the scale there. You pay off the national debt. But you have to also labor, work harder to get all the hundreds of metric tons for 6,000 per barrel. Something is wrong somewhere here. Someone is not doing something right here. So this is where we have to put a deliberate mining policy that is centered on not only having Zambians, the beneficiaries in terms of ownership, but it should also retain that money in the banks here, so that when that money of selling the copper is retained in the banks here, it doesn't matter who is selling it, but if it's in the banks here, then there will be enough liquidity in our local banks to be able to give out mortgages, loans and stuff like that. Otherwise, if what goes away there then comes back and lent to us, and then that's when now it can go to Bank of Zambia, then Bank of Zambia gives it through MPR and Treasury, whatever, how they give the money to commercial banks. This is where to control the monetary policy becomes very difficult. It's still, the Minister of Finance is still handicapped. He just has to keep raising the MPR because he has no choice. It's always borrowed money. Right now, we are on this IMF SDR of 1.4 billion. What is 1.4 billion? Compared to 18 billion which Jam Canton generates of emeralds every year. So our economy is still being tossed like a chess. So it's time now we sat down and formulated deliberate policies targeting the mineral royalty, windfall taxation. Everything has to be put in place. A mining policy that accommodates the local people to be part of it, and it accommodates the revenues and the sales of the money to be retained here in Zambia. If copper is sold, the money stays in the Zambian banks, then it will help to increase to stabilize the dollar kwacha market, because we are in an import dependent economy anyway. And if we are to talk about rapid industrialization overnight, it's not going to happen. Why? Because if we look back at the Industrial Revolution, I think it was 1842, and I've forgotten the year, it started on the principle of water and sanitation. There is no way we can industrialize our country without having to put in place water and sanitation system, because everything borders on that when we're talking about industrialization. And I think Dr. Musonda mentioned this. We've got a third of fresh water inscribed within the Zambian soil in the whole Africa. And that takes about 40% of water in the whole Southern Africa. Abundant sunshine. We have Congo here having cotton for making capacitors for like all these computer gadgets that we're having, network and stuff like that, which Apple uses, Samsung.
And mobile phones.
Yes, so we are surrounded by all these neighbors, which I think about 8 or 9 neighbors around us. All this is a market. This is human beings wanting food. This is human being wanting all metal objects that are used, spoons, pots. We've got this copper. And this issue of telling us, yes, population control, don't make Zambia 30 million, you'll be too many. Come on, America has got 300 million people. If even a musician sings one album, do you know how much he makes for a song? That is million of views, that's money. So it's a deliberate thing, shrink the population and reduce the demand for goods and services. It's an opposite of what they don't do, and that's what they tell us to do. Exactly what they don't do is what they tell us to do. This is now where we have to sit ourselves and say, what? Because the mining component itself is just one component, but the economy is like a human body. It's got all these veins and nerves and everything connected together. You would end up realizing that we could even put aside the mining and focus on tourism, and then you will have no idea how much we can make just from tourism. Bahamas doesn't have minerals. No one pays pay as you earn there. How is tourism? It's all about what like I always say, the primary conversation that the country carries on a daily basis determines the direction of its production of goods and services. If we are just discussing and insulting each other, politics, whatever, do we even know that in Zambia we have a particular bird in Lokimva called the falcon tai, which is the only bird found in Zambia, the whole world? Which TV station talks about it? Because the tourists will come and see that, even make a movie or video out of it. All that is revenue. So we need to bring this economy to a point where we are marketing ourselves. And even when you talk about the mineral business and everything, that is centered on a mining policy that is robust, that is deliberate, that is aggressive, and it is very clear to both an investor and us, the local people, to say if either it's a partnership, if it's a triple P, if it's an absolute ownership, there has to be control. There has to be measures to say if it's a total of mining sector in the country, you can't have more than 50% of the total given to people from away or from outside. It has to be locally profit retained. Even up to 60% of profits have to be retained in local banks when it's sold. Then that way the economy is going to stabilize the market of the currency. And even if the social corporate responsibility is something that somebody can decide to change, if as they go on, they'll say, I'm not making enough profits, so I can't continue funding your hospitals. It happened before. All these Nkana hospitals, whatever, which were funded, it stopped. Some of them are a sorry sight to go there. Even in a government hospital, which was admiring them, is even looking better now. Why? Because those things go with who is investing and in that contract that they have with the government at a particular time. So we can't depend on corporate social responsibility, even when it's a good thing and it happens everywhere, world over. But it's time we flipped the coin and looked more into having majority control and having, clearly agreeable terms and references that protect the sovereignty of our mining and our economy, so that we are the ones in charge. Because these are the minerals God gave us, and and exporting copper in its raw form, we can't be proud of exporting copper in its raw form time and again, century for centuries. At one time, what is this copper being used where it goes? This is what we should start making now. Basics. It could be pots, spoons, forks. People are opening lodges in Zambia on a daily basis. They need spoons, they need forks. We can't wait for a toothpick from China. Toothpick. We send Mukla to China and buy toothpick back. No, come on. We have a lot of carpenters at Woseko there who are very willing. All they need is that CDF allocation. Give them a loan to buy machinery which can make toothpicks. It will cover up and it will cover another. The economy works in this way. When we find a product comparatively to sell out to either the markets around us in Congo or even starting with our own population, it shifts. The market shifts, the generation of income shifts. And if there could be a deliberate also policy of taking advantage of the local markets around us to say, okay, Congo is a bigger market on its own. It needs food. It's got, I think, over 40 million people. They need food. They don't have, stable rainfall to grow
Not
food.
40, 80 to 100 million.
Yes, actually, they are. Yeah, they've got nearly 100 million people already on their own. If we say Congo needs these tons of cabbage per month or so, look around for the farming zones and give those people loans a target capacity to produce that total. How they will do it, it's within themselves as cooperatives or as teams or as companies, but they should reach that target to give Congo monthly. That is revenue just by our neighbor. If Botswana needs this product, so all we have to do is identify the comparative advantage that we've got around us. We will shift the narrative of just depending on the 26% from the copper, and it will give us a leverage. It will give us an option, because when there are options, someone will not take advantage of you. They will know if we mess them with copper, these people have got a big agricultural profile, and we need to also start adding value to all these products. We can't just eat Ishima from maize only all the time. All the cornflakes, everything, some of the baby foods and everything should come from these products that we produce. We need to start adding value, even to the copper itself. Let's hold on to this copper to say, before it goes all the way to the shipyard, can we hold on? Can we make cables? Zamefa is already there. So we have enough engineers in Zambia that can grow this capacity in producing copper wires, like I said. And this is what we've got in the ground God gave us. What is lacking in between this link, where it goes and where it's coming from, is our mindset. What we tell ourselves. Are we waiting to be given a spoon made in China, or we can make it here at Zamefa? If we can, then let there be a policy formulated, an environment created, so that these young engineers, metallurgists, and everybody that are coming out of university in Zambia should not only work for someone, but they should actually start slowly making these things locally. We can make mistakes, like I said, but we have to start from somewhere, because that way it gives us, a leverage mentally of creating an environment that works for us. And that's where generational wealth will come from. And if generational wealth is created in a nation, it stabilizes the foundation of what family economy and community economies are growing into the bigger part of the macro economy, from SME going up there, which we discussed last week, which I really don't want to go to. So really, the mining sector, ownership, control is the bigger, principle there. Whoever gets the biggest share gets the biggest profit. That's why there's this exploitation on, we are going to lay off your workers, because someone knows they've got the bigger percentage. And where the agreements are made, and this is how clever sometimes it happens. They'll sign on change agreements just before the election, knowing the new government, when they come in and change this, we are going to the London Court of Arbitration. So they are clever where the agreements are resolved. They will not let it be resolved locally. It's always Court of Arbitration agreements, and
That's fantastic, Joseph.
In the term of reference. So that's what I had in the 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's 5 minutes talk time. That was fantastic. Very, very, very good points. A lot of our viewers have commented on that. And Joseph, we are at Zamefa. Where is Zamefa? Because Zamefa was one of the value addition companies. They were making cables and exporting all over the world. What happens? Privatization. Zamefa was privatized. It's gone. And that's what we need. And our president, because when I was growing up, I thought being landlocked is a disadvantage. But we're not landlocked. HH says we are land linked.
Yes.
And we've got an advantage, just like those guys who've got the sea. And if we cannot take advantage, just look at Congo. We've got so many things in common. We are similar people, similar culture. Why can't we put a massive plant in Luapula province and start manufacturing, bring Apple to start manufacturing mobile phones? Labor is cheap. All we need to do is to improve technology. We can do that. Let's start manufacturing batteries for electric cars. Let's start manufacturing electric cars themselves. Let's bring those investors. We've got the minerals. Yeah, we've got, before we close and bring our Dr. James Musonda to give us the closing remarks and also to comment about what Joseph has said, we've got one of our Bakwetu family members, and a lady for that matter, People have been complaining that this program is just full of men. We've got a lady here, Kalinda Shachinda. My sister, have you got a question or a comment on what we've been discussing today, mining?
Oh, absolutely, Chilufya. Good evening, gentlemen. Definitely eye-opening, and just since I'm just coming back from Zambia, I'm in the Zambian spirit all over again. Uh, you know, very valid points raised by both the doctors. I hope I'm correct, Dr. Musonda, and is Dr. Nyundu also a doctor, a professor? I don't know.
Joseph Nyundu.
Yeah. So
Mr.
very
Joseph
valid
Nyundu.
points. But, I mean, coming from Zambia, it's not all gloomy, as we would all want to put it. I think I will give this government under the new dawn. I'll give them a year, because already I think the things that you're talking about, Zambia have already signed some sort of economic agreement with the DRC. So let's wait and see what happens there. And I think the Ministry of Mines last week announced about formulating some policy on new addition stuff. I'm not really precise, but something like that. So I think things are moving towards the correct direction. It's going to take some time, because while they are doing all that, there's also the other side that they have to deal with, like the things that went wrong in the past. So I'm happy that you gentlemen are bringing all these, things to the fore. But I'd like us to give us a little bit of more time to the new government to see what they can do. I've every bit of my ounce I've ever believed in President HH doing the right thing for Zambia for once. That's all I had to say.
That's fantastic, my sister, and that was good. You were in Zambia, you've seen it. I'll be in Zambia in 17 days time, 16, 17 days time, and I'll be able to sit down and eat shima with Dr. Musonda. You know,
That would be perfect.
that would be fantastic.
Now we're not Wamale, or not
Yes.
Wamale.
No, I don't eat breakfast. I eat raw meal or.
No, I said, but I said do Wamale. Millet.
Yes,
That's
millet.
the stuff.
Yes. Or are you or yam or tute?
Cassava, yeah. We don't
Cassava,
have
yes.
yam in Zambia, do we?
They do bring it.
Oh.
We've got it. Yeah. So thank you so much for that contribution, Mr. Nyundu. That was fantastic. Dr. James Musonda, sorry for keeping you long. We've got people with talk time here, like our brother Joseph Nyundu. Not only talk time, he talks sense. Very valid point, important points. Over to you, your closing remarks, Dr. Musonda.
Well, thank you very much. Very important and refreshing comments. But I will first start with my sister's comment before I come to just to say a few things about what my brother Joseph, his eloquent positions. Yeah, well, I think that we are all agreed to the idea that we need to give the UPND time, but that's not the question really. I mean, we are not talking about the UPND. Rather, what we are trying to say is, this is not an evaluation of the UPND, really, but to say, okay, fine, this is what we want to achieve, but what is on the ground? We have a system of complete mismanagement and reckless kind of politicking that went around. But if we are to find the solutions, we must fully understand. We must fully. The members say, meaning that you should have at least known the journey still. But whether that journey was risky. There's no point to even say, but the point we are saying is that let us fully understand. Again, the UPND government has got a lot of responsibilities, and any mistake, but the point is that this is not an evaluation. Maybe we'll do that 5 years later or 4 years. But for now, that's not the question and the debate. Like, yes, of course, we know this. Now, I want to quickly come to my brother, Joseph. And before I make a comment, I don't know if you would allow me just to ask him, just this is a rhetorical question. But Joseph, how can we achieve this when in India, they are protesting against Vedanta for human rights and environmental records? And every year in London, at the AGM, they are protesting against Vedanta. But your Zambians in Chilabombwe are protesting for the return of Vedanta. Have you ever heard of that? First of all, Joseph Ponshila.
Thank you very much, Doc.
Joseph, you're restricted to 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we can talk in the background. You know, it's getting late. Our guest, but he's the one who has allowed you. But I'm only giving you 2 minutes. It's getting late.
Okay, thank you very much. So it still gets me back to control and access to capital, because they know that capital mining projects, such as what happens at Mopani, KCM, Gem Canton, all those major macro capital projects, those are not easy for like SMEs to do them. For instance, they are very agreeable on international investment and the global conglomerates, and because they know that we are an economy that is small currently, so anybody with those billions of dollars of investments or hundreds of millions of dollars to inject into our mining sector with equipment which is sophisticated and expensive and heavy equipment, when they pull out or they fall prey to a new regime and they fail to conclude their agreements well, and then they end up pulling out, or they are chased away, or maybe they withdraw or suspend their operation, the ripple effect is exactly what Dr. Musonda alluded to. The employment gets at risk. And what a miner looks at, it doesn't matter the mechanism, how the agreements were done. Most miners don't even understand what agreements were made between the mine they work for. All they know is my salary is 15,000 kwacha, my contract is 10 years, and my gratuity is so much. That's where a miner is concerned about. And my pension is ABCD, which either I'm waiting for or I'll get after. The mechanisms of how those agreements happen is now government and the investor. And that's the link where I think the access to information bill has to be actualized, so that I think people should be getting a little bit of understanding on what these agreements that are signed between government and conglomerates and everybody else. I know it because it involves us, the taxpayers, to actually pay for these loans, pay the consequences of arbitration or penalties which are given when the Court of Arbitration in London, carries out their judicial processes on the breach of these agreements. And they're clever that they do have these agreements signed, in agreement under these courts of arbitration that are outside Zambia, because they know that for transparency's sake, there is no control. And it comes back to control. They know that nobody is in control of the London Court of Arbitration in Zambia. So if Mopani has a conflict with the regime or the ministry or whoever, and they pull out, the workers will cry for them Vendetta to come back, because they're the ones with the capital. They're the ones with the ownership. They're the ones with the big chunk with the cake that we're all looking for. So this is where it comes back to control. If we can actualize control percentage and redraw, go back to the drawing board and rearrange these concessions on the terms and percentages on majority shares, then we'll find ourselves that even if somebody went, if we are on the bigger majority share, we can sustain the mining operation for a period of time to which we can find somebody else agreeable. There's a lot of people lined up to do these mining projects.
Joseph, 2 minutes is over. We're getting late. We'll talk more. But you raised a very important point. These guys are coming to invest in Zambia. They're mining copper in Zambia. And then the jurisdiction for disputes is in London and in South Africa. What an insult. So which means we have no control of anything. Our copper, our We've got credible courts. Why would be the jurisdiction be in London or in South Africa when they are mining copper in Zambia? Over to you, Dr. Musonda. You muted, Dr. Musonda.
Thank you. You see, first and foremost, we must stop politics when it comes to these issues of national interest. I deliberately asked the question of the protest that happened in the pro-Vedanta protests, the Vedanta must return. Those are politics. Let us stop it. Let us stop it. There's no one, whether Glencoe has got money or not, who's going to support the return of, if people are not paid. There's no one. Okay, I've asked a question. Where were all these people when Mr. Lungu was getting that company? Where were they? If they just realized now that because the unions, for example, they were on rampage. Then we had recently, some branch leaders in the union went to say they want Vedanta. Now we have seen a group of youths who are not even employed in the mines. They've never been retrenched. They have never experienced the suffering. Then they are organized. Let us stop politics. Let us stop. You see, when we put politics ahead of economic, we are not going to change anything. And what we are seeing in Chilabombwe is not good politics at all. Let that, in my view, and I want to humbly put this, please, all those youths and everybody else involved, just stop it. Let us, we see, for example, the president said, we have removed the case from court and brought it on the table for us to negotiate. What is this? When the president is still negotiating with his team, with Vedanta, then what is this? So meaning, what are we saying? We want to create a platform for Vedanta. Where is this coming from? Is it from Vedanta? Is it from politicians? Let us just stop it. And the problem is this. In this global life we are now, there's perception. Perception is very important. Just perception. Okay, ngabasta protest filafini. Turemoneka shani. Gani for UPND. Turemoneka shani. Ngabasta protest. Gani for UPF. Whoever it is who in government. Elama protesting. To ala moneka. What impression? Because protesting is one thing. You see what used to happen in UPF. If somebody misbehaves, there's going to be a protest of a supportive NGO or a corrupt political party, small party. Then the following day, the police will move in to arrest that person that is coming from the people. No, the new dawn is a good, in my view. It stands on a very strong platform to do differently. And it's got capacity. We've got a good leader. He's a businessman. And we've got quiet people. I respect people like Jack Mwimbu, I must tell you, Cornelius Mwetwa. These people, look at how they fought against the butane. I trust these people very much. I really do. And I hope that if we are going to have that butane spirit continue, and forget about this PF, because let us avoid at all, by UPND, they should avoid at all to behaving in any way similar to the PF, because the PF has been the disaster. That's why I've insisted, even those people who are defecting from PF to, just forget about them. Imagine already Mbalala Baposa Molubish. Just look at the UPND, the MMD. They looked more like MMD in 2015 and 2016. That's why people rejected them. So if you allow these criminals, it will be just forget. There are 2.8 million Zambians are enough. Forget about those criminals. We rejected them. Now, just to conclude, I move away from politics. Sorry, and I check my politics. Just to conclude, but Joseph has raised an issue which is very important. The problem we have about whether we are going to have more stake has to go to what motivates the party in power. There's the idea of the manifesto, the party manifesto. If you have read the party manifesto that of the UPND, for example, it will tell you what the economic agenda is. Now, what we need to do is that, is there room for the kind of adjustments? I think these are the things that we need. And we need proper engagement, not just on TVBakwetu, but also engagement with these people. The problem is that they are inaccessible. When you try to talk to them, you send them in an SMS, they don't respond. That's a problem we have. Now, we end up being perceived as if we are against the government. Because, I mean, which platform do we have to communicate our ideas? And also, if somebody said, come here, what are your ideas? It becomes difficult for me because I'm already intimidated. I think that we need deliberate engagement and say, okay, what is the issue? What are the issues? What are the problems we have? I've always said the UPND has got all the excuses. Every problem, they can just blame it on the PF or the MMD or everybody else. But then they say, for example, we can say, let us tighten our belts because what we expected to find, the extent of the damage is beyond our control. So if we're not going to do. So the most important thing, if we are going to realize what my brother Joseph is talking about, first, let us for once remove politics from the economy. Economic management, let it be free of politics. And then we are going to have a legacy for the first time that supports this country. So I think in Chilufya Kuranda, except to say that what we tried to do today was to bring a life of a mine worker, because we are saying this mine worker should produce 3 million tons. So we said, if this mine worker has to produce 3 million tons, look at his life. Look at the life of the children. In fact, there are even now women in mining. So look at even this woman producer. If we are going to say 3 million, we can achieve it. Even with this mine worker, we can achieve it, because you know what? This mine worker has no option. He's a precarious worker. So if this mine worker says, if you say you produce, in fact, the mine worker is even going to produce even when you reduce the salary. They are going to produce. The 3 million is achievable. But the problem is that how many accidents are we going to have? How many deaths are we going to have? They will be stealing. They will be doing all sorts of things, but they will produce. We must look at this mine worker. And if the economy is going to progress, as my brother is saying, first, liquidity. There must be money. If miners can have money to invest in children's school and in the economy, in Ikitwe, in Mufule, go to Luansha today. The Luansha looks like a ghost town. Why? Because Bashmai never fall about cheaper. Go to Mufule, it's slowly turning there. Because the people who get, these are towns, if you remember, these towns from the 19th, they were built as mining towns.
Ndola is even worse.
Yes. No, Ndola survives because of the government, at least their government, headquarters of things and things like that. So people, they have to go for passports, they have to go for, so they bring money in the economy. That's what keeps Ndola, and also now people have gone into the trade of stealing and doing all sorts of crooked things. So you have people who earn money which cannot be accounted for. They don't even pay taxes, most of you, but they are building. But Luansha, which was purely, and the thing about Ndola was that it was closed, the Bonamkubo mine was closed much earlier. But for Luansha, which was closed after privatization, the story is it's something else. We are seeing the same thing happening to Kalulush. So the thing is, we need to move beyond. Also, we need to move alongside mining, bring other things, because mining is. So my point has always been, we have potential for marijuana. My brother talked about certain towns being known for particular things that they produce. Why can't we have, say, okay, Kalulushi produces marijuana, and we employ all these youths, these young grade 12s who have no jobs, let them go and be employed under ZNS, specifically to produce marijuana. We have the gold mines. What are we doing about the gold mines? Are we still waiting for
the emeralds, which are owned
we have
by
the emeralds. We have Mukula. So we want to see. I hope that the new government will think about this, but it may require some restructuring of the manifesto, because that's the idea of the UP. If you've read the UPND manifesto, it doesn't talk about nationalization. It's a purely economic, neoliberal economic agenda. But I think looking at the behavior of the people that we want to deal with, I might suggest that the UPND readjusts its policies in the manifesto.
Thank you so much, Dr. Musonda. It's been a long, long day, and I think Joseph contributed to it. I'm joking. But it's been a long day, and it was a very good discussion, very good points, articulated. Thank you so much once again, Dr. Musonda, Joseph Nyundu once again, and our only sister Kalinda Shachinda, who just came from Zambia. And indeed, what Kalinda was saying is true. This government is capable of achieving the best, but we need to give them time.
And just to add on that about Chilufya, uh, I would like to say or suggest to whoever is in government, they really do need to call a national endeavor on mining, where every voice should be heard, so we can
Yeah,
restore.
mining is one of them, but
Yeah.
also a national endeavor on everything.
Mhm.
Brings all the brains together, but mining is one of them because mining is the biggest earner of forex in the country, the biggest contributor to GDP. And not only that, the government has got an ambitious a project to produce 3 million tons of copper. So they should be a mining endeavor. Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, if
and
they
part
just
of
had
it,
one on economy, so yeah, absolutely, I agree.
and part
Totally.
of it is to negotiate the 50-50%. The Botswanan route. That's the only way. We have no control. At the moment, they will tell you that the CCM controls 22%, but that's just on the board. What about, does that reflect on management? No, it doesn't. So we need a Botswana type of arrangement, joint venture, 50-50% senior management, 50% board, so that we can see what is mined. We can have control over our 50%. If they want to take the 50% revenues, let them leave the 50% in Zambia. But at the end of the day, they need to leave all the revenues here and only take dividends and capital expenditure out of Zambia. Joseph, I know
Uh,
you're itching. I'll give you 1 minute and I'll cut you.
Thank you, Comrade Chilufya. And just on that one, so the actual pricing of this copper is not done in Zambia, it's not done in Africa, it's done at the London Metal Exchange here. And if even you watch on YouTube, how these young boys from Harvard, from
Mm,
Oxford, how they argue, you won't even hear what they're talking about. They're just throwing
mm,
papers anyhow, phone calls, everything, pricing the
mm,
copper that is being mined in Zambia. It doesn't even come here. It's here. It's just
mm,
management of the transaction being done
mm,
theoretically. The actual physical transaction, the copper leaves. Copper belt there drives on the pothole roads, which get stuck in the
mm,
rains because they don't care, and they end up at the port in Durban and they go wherever, whether it's to China, where the steel factory is, and if you look at the market for steel, it's still going high, because you can agree with me, Comrade Chilufya, that even the form of construction, if you look at Wembley Stadium, all these
mm.
buildings that they are making new flats, they are more supported by steel frames
But
and
still,
less concrete, with more prefabrication and stuff like that. That's also part of fire protection and stuff like that, where they're involved in
mm,
them. So the whole thing is the shift of the structural engineering technology,
mm,
creating the demand for this mineral copper to mix with the iron and make this steel alloy, and come up with all these infrastructure, skyscrapers, the new types of flats. So
mm,
everything is because of population demand for housing, to cure the mortgage crisis, which began in 1970 when Margaret Thatcher was
mm,
there. So all this, and if you look at even the type of construction, I was just
mm,
speaking to an engineer who was actually who is advocating for. Look at the buildings for these houses around here. They are
mm,
red brick. They're not concrete like the cement.
mm,
No, they're red brick, because they know that that's natural soil, compacted, heated, and
mm,
it's strong enough. Why are we still going even the cement brick way for an entire building? That's why we
mm,
have many cracked houses. So much
mm.
of these, half-life chemical problems.
That's fantastic,
Yes.
Joseph. You've got
Let,
your 1 minute.
but the mining sector is where I'm saying, let us have control. And that conversation,
And Joseph, control should be now,
yes. No,
because
that
I can assure you the copper prices will never go down going forward.
no.
We're talking of another 10, 20 years, 30 years, because the building look at the buildings here. All the Tesco superstores
Yes.
are steel.
Steel frames.
And then
Yeah.
and then 2030 there won't be any petrol cars.
No.
So that will the demand for copper is just gonna go higher, and
And
that's
just
why
to
they
mention,
scramble.
and,
That's why they scramble for copper.
and that's what,
Somebody made a comment that Zambians are fighting for the Black Mountain, while the foreigners are fighting for our minerals.
and if you
So
look at the just one component to appreciate why God gave us the copper. Copper is the best conductor of electricity in the world. In the so far, it's the best conductor, and we've even got zinc in Zambia, which is the best conductor of heat and a poor conductor of electricity. And these two components, they use them for electric plates on the cooker and all that. And these things are in demand within the market in Zambia and around us. So we've got, so what I'm saying is, from the extraction from the ground, we need to sit in the intermediary as a country and say, okay, it's good you've brought the machinery, you're mining it here, but can we create a policy where a percentage of that production of copper, or that 3.5 metric tons being planned for annual production going forward and increase, can we talk about a percentage that will be retained here in Zambia, and it will be involved in the local, metal industry?
Value adding.
And then
That's
the
another
money,
solution.
and then another bigger thing, the money that is being paid shouldn't go to Switzerland. Let it first sit even in the Zambian bank for 6 months, and then that's when you can transfer it, so that it can
Joseph, we can talk about this the whole night. South Africa, Botswana, they've got this policy, very stringent foreign exchange policies. All the revenues for De Beers, the Botswana, they have to come to Botswana.
Exactly.
And all what De Beers does is capital expenditure and dividends. That's what goes to London, De Beers head office. So guys, thank you so much. It has been a wonderful day. Our viewers, I can't believe it. You're not sleeping. It's almost midnight in Zambia.
We thank
Wherever
them.
you're watching us, thank you so much for watching. It's been a long day, but fantastic day. May the good Lord bless and protect our president, who is doing a great job, found the economy in a terrible situation, working hard, protect our ministers, our permanent secretaries, government workers, and may the good Lord protect our beloved mother Zambia. Thank you so much for your viewership. Good night and bye for now.